To get the most from this lesson, it would be best if you had worked through the two previous videos on sketching with black and white chalk. The first is quite abstract and experimental, and the second starts to work from landscape as a source material. Both introduce you to the principles of creating tone by changing the pressure you place on the chalks. However, if this is not possible, with careful attention, this can be used as a standalone lesson. The subject matter I am using for this lesson will be from photographs I have taken from our Scottish landscape. However, the lesson can be done in response to any subject matter. The same principles would apply if you were working from life, studying still life or portraiture. If you do not have your own subject matter at this time, you could use these images as a starting point. These lessons follow on from previous videos where we experimented with black and white chalk on 3 different tones of paper. Experimenting is an important part of any art and design process. In these lessons, we will experiment further with the potential of the chalks. The main difference in these lessons will be mixing the chalks together to create different tones. We will still repeat the process on different tones of paper to see how this affects the outcome of the drawings. In the first process, we will use black and white chalk on white paper. First, take your black chalk and, as in previous lessons, use the side of the chalk to fill in the main dark tones. Vary how hard you lean on the chalk to change the tone. Lean heavily for the darkest areas and lighter for the mid-tones and the lighter areas. Leave all the really light areas clear. Remember, artists and designers are allowed to use their creativity to change the composition and its tone to improve the drawing. When you are happy you have a good variation in tone, take your white chalk and change the tones further by working over the black chalk. Varying how hard you lean on the white chalk will give you different shades of grey. Notice that if you put white chalk on white paper, you will get a very subtle change of white. Continue to mix the white over the black in order to get a wide variety of greys. You can continue to improve your drawing and your tones by using your black and white in turn when necessary. In the second part of the process, we will continue with this mixing technique, but on this occasion we will use black and white chalk on black paper to see what difference this makes to the outcome. First, take your white chalk and, using the side of the chalk, fill in all of the lightest areas. Lean heavily on the chalk to get the brightest tones and lighter to get a variation in light tone. Now, with the black chalk, fill in some of the black paper. Again, you will notice there will be a subtle difference between the black chalk and the black paper. Now, with your black chalk, shade over some of the white chalk. Remember to vary how hard you lean on the chalk to give you a wide variety of tone. Now go back to your white chalk and mix this over the areas you have filled with black chalk. Continue swapping black and white chalk to further improve your tonal range. Continue this until you are happy you have a wide variety of tonal values in your drawing. In the final process, we will mix black and white chalk on a mid-tone paper, as in the examples here. Start with your black chalk and, using the side of the chalk, shade in the darkest tonal areas, leaning heavily for the darkest areas and a little lighter for the mid-tones. Then take your white chalk, again using the side of the chalk, shade in the lightest areas, leaning heavily for the brightest tones and a little lighter for the lighter mid-tones. Try not to overlap just yet. Once you have filled the composition with the main dark and light tones, you are ready to blend the tones together. First take the white and blend over the black where you think you need to change the tones. Remember to continue to vary the pressure on the chalks, as this will help you get a wide variation in tone. Go back to the black chalk and mix over the white in a similar manner, always varying how heavily you lean on the chalks to vary the tone. Keep moving between black and white to get as much variation in tone as possible. Before you finish, ensure you have some areas that are as black as possible and some areas that are as white as possible, and as much of a subtle variation in between. Remember, as an artist or designer, you are allowed to change and modify your tones and composition to make your drawing better. We now have a bold tonal drawing with a wide variety of tones between black and white. For the final part of the process, we will now add linear and textural detail as before. In principle, it is a good idea to have more detail at the front of the drawing, called the foreground, less detail in the middle, and even less detail in the background. This will help add distance to your work. It could be a good idea to photograph your drawing at this stage. As before, we know that white lines will show up well on dark areas and dark lines will show up well on light areas. When black and white lines are drawn on mid-grey areas, the effect is much more subtle. Observe your photograph or subject matter carefully and gradually add more detail, particularly at the front of your work. Adding more detail to a particular area you would like to draw attention to will create a focal point. Continue with this process until you are happy with the result. Always remember, you have artistic license to do what you can to improve your drawing. The use of tone is an important part of any expressive process, but can also be used to create very interesting final outcomes, as can be seen here in the work of Pablo Picasso, George Braque and Pierre Mondrian. We hope you enjoyed this lesson. You can share your projects with us on Twitter by tagging Glasgow Create.